Hello, welcome to PCAP's Native Prairie Speaker Series. My name is Carolyn Gannett, and I am the manager of the Saskatchewan Prairie Conservation Action Plan. Today, Laura Griffin with the Anne and Sandy Cross Conservation Area will be talking about engaging communities in nocturnal conservation and why nocturnal preserves are needed in Canada. Every month, PCAP asks someone to present either in the form of a webinar or an in-person talk in a Saskatchewan community on anything to do with native prairie conservation or species at risk. We have a few webinars coming up, including one on September 27th at noon with Heather Nenninger with Sage Grouse Initiative. We'll be talking about their recovery efforts for greater sage grouse in Montana. On October 18th, Peter Joyce with the Saskatchewan Ministry of the Environment will be talking about the Prairie Mitigation Guide. Details for both webinars will be posted on our website in the near future. I would like to take a moment to note that in-kind support for today's webinar has been given by the Anne and Sandy Cross Conservation Area. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type it into the question section of the webinar dashboard, and questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Now, a bit about our presenter. Laura has been the educational interpreter at the Anne and Sandy Cross Conservation Area for over 8 years, where she is actively engaged in the creation and delivery of the ASCCA's school programs to youth and adults. Born in Calgary, Laura loves exploring the parks, prairies, and mountains around her home. Her passion for ecology led her to complete an applied bachelor's degree in ecotourism and outdoor leadership. Within that program, she worked as a videographer and has conducted and filmed both interviews and expeditions across Alberta and Baffin Island. And now I will turn it over to Laura.
Hello. So I want to start off by thanking PCAP for having me here today. Oh, wait, I have to show you my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to start off by thanking PCAP for giving me the opportunity to speak here on behalf of the Anne and Sandy Cross Conservation Area, all about nocturnal preserves, which is something that we are particularly excited about. A little bit more of a background on me is I am a dark enthusiast. I love the dark. If I'm having a bad day, I want to go sit in the dark. And as a teenager and young adult, I was frequently sneaking out to have little nighttime walks in nature. My roommate in university can tell you stories of times where I've come bursting into the room to grab my camera to go film or photograph a skunk or a raccoon, to which she usually replied, "If you get sprayed, don't come back." So if you're not a fan of the dark, we are just going to start off the presentation by showing you this adorable video of some fox kits. This was a den that was found on our Anne and Sandy Cross Conservation Area property by some of our volunteers. So we set up a wildlife camera. Gives you a pretty good indication of what goes on at night when humans are mostly in their beds asleep. It's not that bad of a place with their small fox kits playing everywhere. You can even see it's a good indicator of their little tapetum lucidum in their eyes reflecting the light, the camera back. So today we're going to be talking about what is the Anne and Sandy Cross Conservation Area, what are nocturnal preserves, what is light pollution, and how does it affect the ecological world, and how are we recruiting people to the dark side and our future actions. Just having quick, oh, there we go. Okay, so Anne and Sandy Cross are this adorable couple here. They are our founders who originally started this area, and In 1945, Sandy Cross started buying up land in the area from various homesteaders. He had a very historic family. His father is A.E. Cross, so if you're familiar with Alberta or Calgary, you might know of the Calgary Stampede, and so A.E. Cross was one of the founding four. And his grandfather was Colonel James McLeod, who signed the Treaty 7 with the Aboriginal natives in this area. So he ranched the land, and later on in life, he met the love of his life. He was a confirmed bachelor until he met Anne Cross, who was already widowed with 5 children. But they got married when he was 60, and they continued to ranch the land and live on this beautiful piece of land. And while they were ranching the land, they noticed that there was a ton of animals that lived on the ranch with their cattle. And so they decided that if you're looking north towards the city, in the distance, you could see that Calgary was getting bigger and expanding and getting closer to their property. So when they were going to retire, they said instead of selling it, they had a habitat. We have 3 guiding principles out here, and we're just going to show you some pictures of the Anne and Sandy Cross very quickly. We have some hiking trails, some education groups that come out. Guiding principles are to protect the habitat and provide space for native species. We offer education programs, particularly to young people, and we have to manage human use of the area. So when we first started in 1987, this was, you had to call in advance in order to come out here for a hike. Nowadays, you can use the internet or book at our kiosk. So the total area is 4,800 acres. And down here in this corner, there's this little square. We aren't a perfect rectangle, but that gives you a general idea of how big we are and where we are in relation to Calgary. So when he would have given us this land, this little area here probably wasn't even as developed as it is now. We're mostly aspen parkland. And that is a bit about our background, but every story has a dark side, as you will find out. And ours happens to be that we are Nocturnal Preserve now. And not only are we a Nocturnal Preserve, we happen to be Canada's first Nocturnal Preserve as designated by the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, which I will refer to as the RASC during this presentation. Royal Astronomical Society of Canada is a group of astronomers. They've been together for a very long time. They're going to be celebrating their sesquicentennial in 2018 to give you an idea of how old this establishment is. And they are a club, an astronomy club that you can join across Canada. They have various chapters throughout Canada that you can be a part of. And they have various designations about nocturnal preserves. So back in 2010, the Anne and Sandy Cross Conservation Area approached them to see if they could become part of one of their designations. So as a dark sky preserve. They also have a designation called the Urban Star Park designation, which is for areas that are not darkly pristine, but still have astronomically usable skies. So these are parks that you might find within a city that are surrounded by the city lights. The catch with both these designations is that they assumed regular nighttime access for astronomers. So they did our audit, and as you can see here, when they do a lighting audit for you, they'll go out, this is one of the astronomers there, checking out the lights, and they'll tell you what kind of light it is, whether or not it's a problem for keeping the skies dark, and solutions. So some of those solutions, as you can see, are free. You just have to aim them downwards. And other ones, you might have to replace the fixture. So they did this audit, and unfortunately, we did not fit into their molds. We cannot be a dark sky preserve or an urban star park because as a wildlife reserve, which is what our designation is under Alberta, we cannot allow access to people between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. And if you're wondering who wants to come out at 4 a.m., you can talk to someone that you might know who's a birder. They can tell you all about that. So we didn't fit. However, the RASC, Calgary Light Pollution Abatement Committee, saw that this was still a very valuable thing to try and pursue, that we should be trying to preserve night skies, even if it's just for the ecological benefit of it. So they did a lot of work, and they decided to come up with a new classification of a nocturnal preserve. They presented this to the National Light Pollution Abatement Committee that they had at the RASC, and eventually it was all agreed that this is a good thing. We should definitely be doing this because it's going to benefit astronomers. Even if we can't go to this site at 2 a.m. in the morning to view a meteor shower, we can go nearby and still have it be having a positive impact on the dark skies around it. So in 2015, we were designated as a nocturnal preserve, and I'm going to read you, it's very dry, the exact definition. So it's an RACA nocturnal preserve is a region that's set aside for biological conservation. There's no general requirement for nighttime public access for astronomy or ecotourism, though both may be part of the park's outreach program. A nocturnal preserve is defined as a protected area for wildlife. However, publicly supported conservation areas and parks invariably provide access to visitors. It is the purpose of a nocturnal preserve to minimize the impact of the environment of artificial lighting for human access. So basically, you can come, we have to shut our lights off at night, point them downwards, keep all of our upward lighting to a minimum and the use of lights to a minimum, but it's for the wildlife, it's not for astronomers. No one can come in after dark. So to give you a brief summary of this whole ordeal and to give a bit of a shout out to the astronomers who helped us at the RASC Calgary Light Pollution Abatement Committee. One of our volunteers, the graphic designer, did this little sketch of how nocturnal preserves came to be in Canada. So why do we even need nocturnal preserves and dark sky parks? It's because of something that you call, or we call, light pollution. Most of you may have heard of this by now. Not everyone has so. So this is a picture of Earth at night. It's from NASA. And it shows all the light that's emanating upwards into the heavens for the astronauts in the space station to see. And this is basically wasted light. There's not a lot of reasons why you need to be lighting upwards, unless you're hoping to light up a landing strip for a plane, which is totally understandable and is a safety feature and strongly encouraged for those who are flying. We're doing this webinar in North America, so this is an up-close version of North American light pollution. So the white spots are the severely polluted area. Red is the next level down, and then it goes all the way to the black. So as you can see in the oceans, very pristine environments. There's some desert areas. And up here in Canada, this is Alberta. And you can see we are quite light polluted. This is Edmonton, Red Deer, it's this little orange spot in between them. And Calgary, where we are close to, is this giant white spot. So we are doing a significant amount of the light pollution in Western Canada. So, and light pollution is just defined as the excessive and inappropriate artificial light. This is a definition from the International Dark Sky Association, which is referred to as the IDA. So here's Calgary during the day and our lovely Anne and Sandy Cross Conservation Area. And then at night, this is it again. You can see a very distinct outline of Calgary. You look at this orange rope that seems to be going through the city. This is the Calgary Ring Road that's currently under construction. And they've just got to this part here which they're planning to complete, which we are very concerned about as a nocturnal preserve, not only for us, but the Rothney Astrophysical Observatory is right here on the map. It's our neighbor. It was actually also donated by Sandy Cross as from part of his ranch originally. So we are both concerned that when they build this park, if it's going to be this bright, it's going to impact our dark skies. And if you're wondering who Scott Kelly is, he is an astronaut. So this photo was taken 400 kilometers up in the sky on the International Space Station. So it's quite a significant mark we're leaving. I'm not going to go into too much detail about light pollution, but I will tell you about 3 types that are going to come up. So sky glow is this orangey, hazy, pink horizon there. It can be pink. It is what you can see when you're traveling the roads at night and you're coming to the city, and you can see it well before you get there. It can be seen from over 100 kilometers away, and it's caused by improper use of light. So either lights that are shining upwards or lights that are shining down and reflecting onto reflective asphalt and snow and things like that. So very good indicator of where the cities are. The joke that you can't get lost anymore because you can follow the sky glows. And this photo was taken by Larry McNish, who's one of the astronomers who's on that light pollution abatement committee. He does a lot of very fine photography work at night and videos as well. Another type of light pollution that you might be familiar with is glare. So if you're on the highway at night and you're driving and somebody has their brights on when they're coming towards you, you've experienced glare. So your eyes can't adjust to the sudden brightness. It prevents you from seeing properly. These are some glare from these street lamps here. The way this works is your pupil at night, if it's a nice dark area like this, it's going to be dilated so you can catch as much light as possible into your eye. And then when you're exposed to glare, your pupil is going to contract and it gets very small. And it takes a long time for your pupil to actually dilate again. So if you go from that brightness back to the darkness, you're not going to be able to see as much definition around you. So they do use this to cause disorientation. They have things like flash bombs, well-known effect. Or if you've ever been flashed by a child with a flashlight, you also know this effect. Light trespass is something when someone's light is shining into someone else's property. So I temporarily lived in an area like this where it was so bright at night that if you shut off all of your lights and you shut your curtains, you could still read a book, which was unpleasant. And it's not always caused by your neighbor. Sometimes it's caused by the street lamps outside of your house. So there are many instances where you might hear of people complaining about the street lamps right outside of their doorways. So these things can be prevented by proper shielding or proper direction, as you can see on the right side of the picture. Those people are using their lights in a more responsible and more effective manner. So those are light pollution. The other thing with light pollution is that it's can be a huge waste of energy. So we all need lights. We're not saying everyone should shut off the lights and go back to the dark ages. We just want people to be aware of where their light energy is being used. So these are taken from the IDA in the United States Department of Energy. But it's estimated that there is 17,400 gigawatts hours a year that are wasted in uplight or things that are just going into the atmosphere or misdirected. So if you average 10 cents per kilowatt an hour, that's going to give you about $1.74 billion a year that's being wasted. Don't worry that not all of these slides are so full of figures. So to give you an idea of how this affects our carbon footprint, about 10,768 BTUs are used to generate 1 kilowatt hour. And if you're like me and you're wondering what is a BTU, it's the energy used to raise 1 pound of water by 1 degree Fahrenheit. So 1 ton of coal will produce 20.7 million BTUs. 1 barrel of oil produces 5.8 million BTUs. So if you do the math, about 9.1 million tons of coal, or almost 600 million gallons of gasoline, are wasted each year in this uplight. So the Alberta electrical generation capacity, this is taken from Alberta Environment. You can see that most of the energy here is being produced by either natural gas or coal. So we're just hoping that with this electrical generation capacity, that if we are generating less energy because we're using our lights in more efficient manners, then we are going to cut down our use of natural gas and coal. There's still going to be the same percent, so it's just going to be less of them. So in Calgary, in 2014, around that time, they did a retrofitting of all the street lights and just shield them and point them downwards, change them over to LEDs, and it ended up estimated saving Calgarians $1.7 million a year. So if you can't convince people to have a talk about light pollution because of the effects on the animals and the effects on the stars, you might be able to grab their ear and their attention by talking about where their tax money goes. So this is a quote from Larry, and this is from when he was driving around at night looking for places to set up. And seeing all the sky glow around him, said, aside from the huge environmental impact, especially on all nocturnal creatures, irresponsible lighting is also an incredible waste of taxpayers' money. Scotobiology. So we're going to talk about today some of the effects that this light pollution is having on creatures. And so you have to look at scotobiology, which is the study of the biological systems that require nightly darkness for their effective performances. This term was first coined in 2003. There was an Ecology of the Night Symposium in Muskoka, Ontario, and everyone at that symposium understood that there are things that happen at night that we can study and are not necessarily familiar with, because again, we don't necessarily go out at night. That's our sleeping time. And we needed some kind of a word to talk about this stuff. So scoto is Greek for dark. Biology is the study of life. And so as you can tell in this dark area here, there's no picture because I wanted to leave it up to your imagination of what mysterious things are going on in that dark space. So part of scotobiology is looking at circadian rhythms. These are the body's internal clock. It's a 24-hour day and night cycle that controls an organism's biological schedule through hormone regulations. So in animals, which includes humans, and plants, melatonin is the hormone which regulates the ebb and flow of the other hormones in the body. In turn, these other hormones repair damaged tissues, they fight infections, they perform several other important tasks in the body. And it has been clearly established that circadian rhythms are rigidly linked to light and dark cycles. So they've done experiments on animals. They've kept animals in total darkness for extended periods and eventually demonstrated a free running rhythm with no predictable pattern. So normally in your circadian rhythm, there's a certain time of day where you're feeling the most alert and your brain is functioning at its highest level. There's a time of day, which you're probably familiar with, when you're the sleepiest. So there's the 3 p.m. siesta, in humans anyways. So when there's kept in darkness, these things just started happening all over the place. So this research has influenced the design of spacecraft environments. So they will mimic light and dark cycles for the astronauts so that their circadian rhythms don't go amiss and all over the place. The American Medical Association has stated that all creatures need darkness in order to survive. And the thing that's controlling all of these circadian rhythms is our hypothalamus. So this is a thing that is attaching your nervous system to your endocrine system. So the messages that are coming through your eyes and your optical nerves are going into there and being converted so that into hormones, which is going to affect mating, migration, sleep, and foraging behaviors, all things we're going to talk about. Before a quick question of, speaking of light and dark cycles, hopefully some of you caught the solar eclipse yesterday. Very exciting. Was there any mood shifts? We had a little event out here and there was mood shifts. I don't think it had anything to do with the circadian rhythm, just probably the excitement of the event. So plants can recognize the differences between light and dark, and we're going to talk about them first because they're at the bottom of the food chain. So all of sun's energy goes to the plants and works its way up through the food chain. So many plants respond to the length of daylight and normally recognize it as an indication of the season. So the Earth is tilted on its axis as it's going around the orbit of the sun. And you can see if you're in the northern hemisphere here, you're in winter because you're facing away from the sun, which means you're going to have extended periods of dark and shortened periods of daylight. And opposite is true over here in summer. You're going to have extended periods of daylight and shortened periods of darkness. And if you are in the southern hemisphere, it's vice versa. Over here you're in summer, over here you're in winter. So plants have evolved to understand that these seasonal changes happen. It's better for them to respond to the cues of the sun in the daylight because water levels and temperature fluctuate. So if you know Calgary or have heard of Calgary, we're well known for our crazy weather out here. We can have snow in any season of the year. So if you're a tree and you see snow in Calgary, it's not a good time to prepare for winter necessarily. It might just be snow-timber all over again. So this particular light and dark ratio will initiate biochemical changes in the tree, which prepares them for this winter dormancy. Uninterrupted dark periods is critical for this process, as well as flower bud initiation in certain plants, which I was supposed to show you that earlier. It's going to lead to fruiting bodies and also some buds, as you can see here on the tree. So in the colder environments, these changes are going to occur earlier, which lets the plant become cold hardy faster. So when you expose trees to extended light periods, so artificial light, the leaves and the buds that are nearest to this source of light are going to perceive an endless summer. This means they're not going to start to do their normal biological functions when they should. So in autumn, it's very easy to see this change because you'll notice that on some street lamps, the leaves right underneath them are going to stay green longer, and the other ones are turning yellow or red, or whatever autumn color is your favorite in this instance. So that color change is the senescence of the leaves, and senescence is the important function of recycling nutrients to go back into the trees, mostly nitrogen, and goes into the growing and the storage organs of the plant. Then when the frost arrives, because all of this stuff has been stored away, the leaves die off and it doesn't have as big of an impact. However, if you're in your green mode and you haven't done senescence, when the frost comes, it's going to kill off your leaves before you get that nutrients back into you. So over time, this can impact the health of the tree, particularly in that part of the tree. So recent studies has demonstrated that high-intensity light sources, such as high-pressure sodium lamps, have the greatest impact on delaying leaf senescence and the subsequent dormancy of the trees. So to sum up, nighttime illumination, particularly from high-pressure sodium lamps, may result in a disruption of plants' shoot growth, flowering, leaf expansion, and abscission, and bud dormancy. And in temperate climates, this can result in making them more susceptible to frost, to fungal infections, and insect infestation. So if you look over here, we tried to capture one of my favorite little things, the spruce gall, which is a type of insect infestation. Those are our plants. Now we're going to talk about the animals. So many animals are nocturnal. Why do they want to become nocturnal? What's so great about the dark? Some of them do it to avoid other predators. So if you're active at night, you only have to worry about nighttime predators. It's also to change up your competition. So if you're a bird of prey, you don't want to necessarily compete with all the other daytime birds of prey. You evolve to work at night where the prey can still be found. A lot of desert animals are nocturnal, and this is to avoid the heat. Cooler temperatures at night, sun's not blaring down at you, you can conserve water. So if you're a nocturnal animal, we've got some nocturnal adaptations, the things that I like to call your superpowers for living in a dark environment with not a lot of light. So there's moonlight and there's starlight, an ideal dark environment that we have interrupted in the last 100 years or so of artificially lighting the night. Though we had fire before that, but it's not quite as bad. So your sense of touch might increase. So if you're a raccoon, you have those incredibly sensitive fingers. If you're a cougar, you can have whiskers that are very sensitive, and whiskers on different parts of your body for helping you walk through the undergrowth without making too much sound. Your sense of smell might be increased. So you might have a very keen nose, you might have long nasal passages. Also for your sense of smell at nighttime, because the air tends to be more still, scents tend to linger on in the nighttime longer, so having a sense of smell is incredibly helpful. At night, your sight might have improved significantly as you evolve. So a lot of nocturnal species have huge eyes. The eyes in an owl, for instance, they're so big they can't actually move in their sockets anymore, which is why they get to do that 270-degree spinning of their necks. And they also might have a lot more concentration of rods in their eyes. Sorry about that. So your hearing might also improve. A lot of nocturnal animals, you'll notice, have big ears. Bats are well known for having their echolocation, which helps them find their prey, and they can hear well beyond the range of humans. And I included the catfish down here for increased sense of taste, not because they're a nocturnal animal, but because they live in a very dark, murky environment, and they have the most taste buds of any organisms we've studied so far. They have about over 100,000 taste buds. They can actually use their taste buds to detect where the prey is. So they get honorable mention of living in a dark environment and get to be on the slide. So this quote is from a research scientist, Christopher Kiba, who is talking about nocturnal animals. It says, the introduction of artificial light probably represents the most drastic change human beings have made to their environment. So if you have all these superpowers for living at night, somebody introduces a light, all of a sudden your superpowers aren't that effective. It's like Superman dealing with kryptonite. You can still save things, but it takes more time. So foraging patterns can be changed by the introduction of artificial lights. One of the first incidents that I actually remember being introduced into light pollution was when I was looking at the Orr's kangaroo rat. So I was doing a project in school studying the rat. And these little guys, they live in the desert. They are in Alberta, so don't tell the rat patrol, but we do have rats here. They're on the little military Suffield base. They have a very small habitat of grassland area, and they have gone into the nighttime world. They've become nocturnal because, again, avoiding heat of the day. They're also very sensitive to predators. So they have lots of predators they have to avoid, whether they be snakes or owls. And so on moonlit nights, they will not go out and forage. So it's a full moon. These guys are hiding in the burrows, stalking or eating all the little food that they have cached away, which is really important for them because they don't actually drink water. All the water that they get comes from the food that they're eating. So when you introduce things on the subfield base, there are some industrial pads that are working throughout the night. They have their lights shining brightly. And what's happening is that it's mimicking moonlight. So in this picture, it's not an industrial pad, but this is Edmonton. You can see the moon here, which is sort of drowned out by these brighter lamps down below. So this is going to mimic the moonlight. It's going to trick the kangaroo rat into believing it's not a safe time to go outside, because it's not, because even though it's not the moon, it's still letting the predators know where they are more easily. And they're going to stay inside, and so their habitat is getting shrunk down again by yet another cause, which could be switched if people would shield those lights in a better manner. Breeding can also be affected. So they've done studies on wood frogs, and they found that male wood frogs are less likely to do their mating calls at night when there's illumination present, which impacts the females, because if you're not calling out for a male and saying, hey, look at me, I'm a nice looking frog, the females aren't going to find you. So they're not going to find these leks where the male frogs are waiting, and they're less likely to breed and carry on their offspring. One of the first studies that was done on light periods was done on the junco, and this was done in Edmonton. So they had these juncos in an outdoor aviary in the middle of winter, and what they were doing was they were exposing them to light after dark. So sunset would happen, and they'd put on illumination they'd basically illuminate the area and keep the lights on for a longer period of time and then shut them off. And they found that under these artificial lighting conditions, these birds came into reproductive condition despite the harsh Canadian winter temperatures. So as you can tell in this picture, I wanted you to sort of sympathize with this little bird trying to build a nest and sit on some eggs in this cold condition. It doesn't matter how long it's going to sit there, those eggs are not going to hatch, which is very unfortunate. Migration is a huge problem when it comes to light pollution. I guess migration isn't the problem. Light pollution can have a huge effect on migration. So this is a picture at my place. Every year there's hundreds of barn swallows that come out for about a week at a time. We don't see them until this period, just to gather and get ready before they go and migrate. So birds like to migrate in giant flocks. So changes in migratory behavior may result from alterations in melatonin levels or other circadian and seasonally based signals. Changes in timing and or efficiency of migration and general orientation can be detrimental in terms of both survival and reproduction. So even low levels of artificial lights effectively mimic the natural influences of the lunar cycle. And urban sky glow causes sky brightening long distances from the original lighting source, potentially affecting these migrating individuals from kilometers away. So these can have drastic ecological impacts. So one of the things is that many bird species migrate at night, or they hunt at night. So this might be because there's less daytime predators around, skies are less turbulent at night, the air temperature is cooler. So you imagine running a marathon, you want to do it when it's cooler and not when it's super hot out. And that's basically what the birds are doing when they're migrating great distances. And it's easier to find food during the day. So when they do have their stop and their resting period in the day, they can hang out and look for some grub to keep them going. So building collisions is a big thing. When they come into the cities, they can be hitting buildings. So there's a picture here. This is a forest at dusk provided by the Ecological chapter. So there's a few theories as to why birds might do this. One of them is in this picture, if you're a bird, you fly towards the lit areas, that's safe for you. You're not going to hit into a tree branch or some needles, and you can fly through safely. If you look at the city at night, suddenly the lit areas that you are seeing aren't safe. So if you fly into those, you are going to be hitting a window. There's actually a organization called FLAP, which is the Fatal Light Awareness Program, and they go around these buildings at night or in the morning, and they collect both dead and injured birds. And from their work, they've been doing this for a very long time, they estimate that in North America alone, about 100 million birds a year are killed through these collisions. It can also just disorientate the birds from the glare. And so there's estimates that around the world globally, we might be losing as many as 1 billion bird species a year to this. The other thing that affects birds with light pollution is that birds can be drawn to light sources and become fixated on the beam. This is something we call positive phototaxis. And they can fly around in those beams until they become exhausted and just fall out of the sky and die. So very sad. This photo is taken in Budapest, in case you're wondering. And another impact on migration is star navigation. So it has been proven that birds do rely on the stars for navigation. There's been experiments in 1957 to say that they did use the stars. And originally they thought they recognized constellation patterns. But in 1967, Stephen and Mel proved that it's actually not the patterns themselves, but it's the rotation around the patterns around a certain star that the birds use to line up their migration routes. So he trapped them in a planetarium. One of the planetariums had no stars in it. One of them had the stars regularly rotating around the North Star, and the other one had a planetarium where the stars rotated around Betelgeuse. So in the one with no stars, the indigo buntings, that's the bird he used, when they went, it was time for them to migrate, they just started pointing in every which direction. Didn't know which way to go. When they did it with the Betelgeuse one, they aligned their north and south based on the Betelgeuse star. So they're all pointing in the same direction, but it was the wrong direction. And then with the north and south one, or with the North Star rotation, they were all pointing in the appropriate direction to fly their migration route safely. So this is a picture of a pristine dark sky environment. You can see all those stars. It's almost hard to pick out the constellation of Orion. And on the right, we have a picture from the city and what that would look like for the birds. So if you're hatchling, trying to get your orientation, trying to figure out which star all these other stars are rotating around, it's going to be a lot easier to see if you can actually see the stars. Okay, distribution changes also can occur. So insects also suffer from phototaxis, some of them. And you've heard the term moths drawn to a flame. And that is what is going on in this photo here. Researchers use this for collecting insects. It's very handy sometimes. And it's estimated that about 1/3 of the insects that are attracted to these lights end up dying, whether it's through contact with the light or through predation. Because the predators know this is basically a little buffet where they can go and chow down. Another thing to talk about with moths is that they've done a study on a certain species of moths, and it has a tympanic membrane which helps them to detect bats' echolocation, which is one of their main predators. So they detect the pinging of the bat's radar coming up echolocation coming off of this membrane, and when it gets really fast, that means the bat is closest to them. And then so at that point, they will fold their wings and do what they call a power dive and drop out of the sky, which essentially means that you've dropped off the bat's radar. So around ultraviolet emitting broad spectrum mercury vapor streetlights, they found that the moth's likelihood to use this power dive technique to escape bats was severely reduced. So not good news if you're those little moths and you can't detect the bats coming. The other thing that this causes is, for bats, some bats can be attracted to the light and other ones will still avoid the light. So there have been studies in Europe, the lesser horseshoe bat, when light was introduced into an area, they were eventually extirpated. They're outcompeted by the pipistrelle bat. So some bats, especially slower flying bats, do not like light at night and will avoid it. They'll change their foraging routes. If you're changing your foraging routes, you can't take a straight line to where you know the food is. That's going to use up your energy and make it less likely for you to survive. I do want to point out this bat is alive. It fell out of the barn when our habitat manager opened the door. It hit him on the head. They were both shocked, but they both survived the experience uninjured. But yes, the bat is okay. The other thing is, even though there's this giant buffet here, it's kind of like having a cafeteria where the school kids know there's food, they can go to the food. However, if there's a big bully here, so if you have a highly competitive predator or a bigger predator, you might not necessarily want to go to where all the food is because you yourself could become food in that instance. So this does also change the balance of the food chain a little bit and make it easier for some predators to get food. You can also have pollination decrease. So they just recently have done a study to show that if a meadow is lit, insect visitation and other nocturnal pollinators are 62% less likely to visit those flowers and pollinate them, which can have a lasting effect because if you're one of those nighttime pollinators, you also might be relying on that plant to produce fruits later or seeds for eating, and if you're not pollinating them as much, they're not going to produce that food that you need later on. And I'm going to stop here. Brief moment, just to show that you can find almost any type of comic on the internet nowadays. So again, if you are not attracted to the light, if you avoid light, it's called negative phototaxis. So what we're going to be doing next is I'm going to show you a little part of our video. We're going to be using this in our Nocturnal Preserve video that we're working on. However, you're going to have to excuse the sound quality. We're still editing it. So this is Lisa Dalseed. She works at the Cochrane Ecological Institute as well as with the Weaselhead Preservation Society. She's a conservation biologist. And it's kind of like a case study on the swift fox and all the impacts that we've just talked about, sort of how they add together to have an impact on this endangered species. And there is a baby partway through the video, but just ignore it. And you might want to turn up your speakers as well.
These animals are nocturnal. They are active at night and they sleep during the day. And so having that presence of dark skies is very important to them because unlike the red fox that adapted so well to human presence and is not affected by lighting or activity of humans, houses, the swift fox did not adapt to that. So when the European settlers came and expanded across the landscape, the grasslands is where they occur, where a lot of our cities occur as well. We lost the swift fox because they couldn't adapt to live alongside us the way that the red fox happily did. And so preserving those night skies for them is really important as their populations hopefully are expanding in Canada. The largest population of swift fox in Canada occur in Grasslands National Park in Saskatchewan. This is because this is where the Cochrane Ecological Institute released a lot of our swift fox. Just over 1,000 swift fox were released in that area of Canada. And so the Grasslands National Park also happens to be one of Canada's largest dark sky preserves. So this is wonderful for swift fox that are active at night, that have an intricate relationship in the food chain with the insects that are affected by light pollution, with the songbirds, the migratory birds that are affected by light pollution, with the amphibians, they'll also eat them. So all these animals that they depend on as a food source, wherever they are in the world, if they are a migratory bird, for example, they're getting affected and their populations are affected by the light sky. So these preserves are very important then to protect the swift fox that are occurring in Saskatchewan as well.
So we're going to try to go through these quickly. So now that we're Nocturnal Preserve, we're trying to spread the word. So we've been having open houses. This is a photo from one of our past staff members, Jen, of a moon through the telescope, so you can have astronomers out to your site. We do outreach programs. We are going into the area. We're talking about nocturnal creatures that you find on the cross. Trying to get people more aware that there are animals outside in the dark. They are just as interesting as the daytime animals, and sort of light pollution in ways that they can change their own practices to make it a little bit friendlier for nocturnal animals. And talking with your neighbors is really important. There's currently a MD of Foothills initiative called Dark Sky Country. It's being run by our MD counselor, Suzanne Ohl, and she's just trying to get people aware that there is a dark sky and that it's something we should be proud of, that we can see the stars from where we live. And you can also have dark sky parties. So there we have people enjoying the solar eclipse yesterday. But if you are at an area, it's a different way to get people to see your site, to see that there is more than just the daytime stuff that they're seeing going on. Our education programs are a large part of what we do, and especially with my job. So these are some day campers. We have a day for nocturnal nights, we call it, in which these they learn about all the different senses nocturnal animals use. We make some bat crafts. The Open Minds Campus Calgary program is run by our education coordinator, Maureen Luxinger. And these kids have a year-long inquiry study, but they spend a week at the Cross Conservation Area. So these are some journal entries that they had. Sometimes their question will allow us to have a day about nocturnal animals or light pollution, and these kids did. And their project was to take something they learned throughout the year about conservation and share it with their school. So a lot of them did choose to share the light pollution. We're also very excited about our new partnership with Rossini Astrophysical Observatory. So this is a program called Conserving the Wilderness of the Alberta Night Sky, where the students can come out to our site for 2.5 hours. We teach them about SCOTOBIOLOGY, the effects that it's having on the wildlife and the plants. And then they go to the observatory and they learn about the astronomical effects, and they get a chance to view the night sky through telescopes. It's one of the largest telescopes in Canada, which is super cool for them. And it works really well with the grade 6 Alberta curriculum because we have to talk about trees and forests, we have to talk about sky science, and we also have to talk about advocacy and citizenship. So this is an issue that it's very easy for them to take a project over to City Council to hear their concerns. We do bat box building, so this is, we use money from our Youth Action Series with Evergreen, and we've had the Calgary Quest School come out and build bat boxes with us. So last year we built these rocket chamber bat boxes. This year we built the 4-chamber ones, and it gets the students familiar with the habitat needs of nocturnal animals and how you can help to improve those habitat needs, whether it's through shutting off your lights or building little homes for them to live in. And they take a lot of pride in their work. You can see him carefully examining to make sure there's no screws or nails in there to harm the little brown bats or the big brown bats. One of our favorite programs is our Halloween Howl. This is an event that we put on every year now, and it's to get people to come out and celebrate being outside in the dark, to bring their families, to dress up. It's not trick-or-treating, but you do get to go to all these stations and learn about nocturnal animals, about stars, get comfortable walking in the dark and having that experience with your family. It's a great way to get to know your volunteers a little bit better because you get to see what they dress up for as Halloween. And our, again, volunteer graphic designer has a lot of fun with this. So it's all about embracing the creatures of the dark and loving the dark space and seeing it as an important part of our environment. Just waiting for our slide. We're also working on Nocturnal Preserve video. So this is with grant money that we very generously received through the Young Professional Stewardship Grant with the Saskatchewan PCAP. So we're filming light pollution. We're talking about how it affects animals, and we're making this so that teachers will have a tool to use in their classroom to share with their students. And we also want to talk about what you can do to help with the lighting. So in your own lighting, you can just remember this mantra of light only what needs to be lit, only when it needs to be lit with the appropriate amount of light. So as you can see in this picture here, their targeted area is the road and the sidewalk, and they have all this wasted light going out every which way and up into the sky, creating light trespass to this home, which isn't good. So all you have to do is go from your SAG lens that it had there to this shoebox lens. The street is still lit, the sidewalks are still lit, and the wasted light is greatly reduced, which also helps to reduce our CO2 emissions. Only when it needs to be lit. So motion sensors are a great way to do this. This is outside of our education entrance. Most people don't go there at night. However, sometimes you work late and you want to be able to see your keys in the doorway when you're walking up. Motion sensors are also better for detecting security risks. So if you have your light on all night, it's not necessarily going to tell you that there is a thief in your yard. If your motion sensor goes off, that's a better indication of an alert that something has changed in your yard. And with the appropriate amount of light. So this photo was taken in Waterton National Park. We got a bighorn sheep enjoying the fact that they are now a dark sky preserve and have shielded their lights and are using the appropriate wattage. So you want to be using lights that are below 3000 Kelvin and that are fully shielded, which we'll show you in a second. So you can learn more about light pollution and its effects. You can learn more about dark sky initiatives and support the dark sky initiatives that are around already in your community. And sharing your knowledge is a great way to help the nocturnal animals. So again, when we went to the Calgary Youth Science Center or Science Fair with our little nocturnal trifold, a lot of them knew what nocturnal was. About 50% of them had never heard of light pollution. And then even just if you know someone who can't get out to the country, carpooling with them to go see the dark sky and get the appreciation that there's other things out there. You can contact your city council and encourage them to support dark sky initiatives like we were doing with the RAO when we were talking to the Alberta Transportation about the ring road. And you can accept only IDA approved street lighting in your community. So there's actually the symbol that you can find on light fixtures now to indicate that this is a dark sky friendly light. So very quick example for you. Switch that. Paris is the city of lights, and even they have a night curfew now. So if you're the Eiffel Tower, you're allowed to be lit up at all times. However, if you're not the Eiffel Tower, from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m., your lights have to be off if you're a commercial business. So on the left, we have sort of unacceptable or discouraged lights. And on the right, we have acceptable lights fixtures. Just very quickly, you can see that there's lots of different designs. But if you have unacceptable or discouraged ones, we're not saying you have to run out and replace them. You can buy motion sensors separately that you can attach to these to use them when you need them. Or you can just figure out when do you actually need these lights. There are times for safety reasons where you might need a floodlight. So just using them more wisely and making better choices of when they're on and when they're off. This is our Cobra street lamp that we're used to, and then here is the newer version of the full cutoff, which most is available now to most cities if they're looking into changing their lights. So in our own family, to conclude, we talked to our ducks about it. They realize their circadian rhythms are going to be affected, which affects when they lay their eggs. So we've installed this nice fully cut off shielded light for them. It's a nice amber color. So you're looking for the warm ambers and reds when you are looking for light bulbs, not the cool whites. It's sort of counterintuitive. And it's on a motion sensor. So when we put them away at night, this light is going to be off, but they can safely enjoy pond dipping in the meantime. So for your own self, I'm sorry, we're a little bit over time. We just want you to embrace the power of the dark side. Darth Vader can be friends with the nocturnal world. So can you. You might notice all of the Sith have the appropriate color of lightsabers, whereas the Jedis are getting more into the cool blues and greens that are going to affect your circadian rhythms more. So this is just a list of some helpful resources for furthering your knowledge about this topic. So the Royal Astronomical Society can provide you with guest speakers. They can get you through the application process if you want your site to become one of the dark sky initiatives. And they are Canada's Astronomy Club if you're interested in stars and want to know more about them. The International Dark Sky Association has this amazing artificial light at night research literature database where you can use the search fields to find various international papers about all sorts of things surrounding light pollution. Light Efficient Communities is a branch of the Alberta Dark Sky Association. They actually offer a free course on light pollution that you can take online. They have resource kits and packages that you are free to distribute and share at your own sites, and they have tips for working with city councils. And then the RAO, if you're interested a little bit more about them, they are a research facility. They offer educational programs, and their website's down below there. So thank you very much for coming today, and hopefully you've learned something and that you're much more willing to go out and experience darkness and see all the wonderful, amazing parts of the ecology of the world that it has to offer us.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura, for today's presentation. It was really great and informative. I'm not sure we have time for questions, but if anyone has a pressing question that they want Laura to answer right now, you can type it into the questions section of the webinar dashboard, and I can ask her for you. And if you do have a question and want to get it related to Laura, you can send it to pcap@sestel.net and I can send it to her. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. You'll receive an email after this presentation with a quick questionnaire. Please fill it out. It'll only take a minute or so, and it really helps us improve our programming. If there's anything you want to learn more about regarding native prairie or species at risk conservation, please let us know. And for upcoming events, check out the PCAP website, www.pcap-sk.org. Click on Communications and Native Prairies Speaker Series, and that'll have all our upcoming presentations as well as links to our previous presentations. You can also check out our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/users/skpcap for the recording of this video and all past presentations. And you can pass on the link to anyone who could not be here today. So thank you again, Laura. Thanks everyone for stopping in, and have a great rest of your day.